joining me today to talk to us about the scientific method of how your sleeping schedule can actually affect your grades on your exams.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today to go over the steps of the scientific method regarding deductive versus inductive reasoning and to teach you about the differences between hypothesis, theory, and law.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your hypothesis and the steps of the scientific method?
Yeah, I would love to talk to you more about the steps that are involved in the scientific method. The first step is to make an observation. These observations are based on specific events that have already happened and can be verified by others as something that is true or false. The second step is to ask a question. This is a query pertaining to the original observation. The third step is to create a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a potential answer to that question, one that can somehow be tested. When you create a hypothesis, it is important to predict what is occurring or what will happen with an if-then statement. The fourth step involves developing an experiment. An experiment should include a detailed set of procedures that will test the hypothesis. In this step, the variables and constants should be identified. The difference between an independent variable and a dependent variable is that an independent variable is the variable that is changed, and the dependent one is where it changes based on the independent variable. The next step is to collect and organize data. As you work on your experiment, you are making observations that will become your experimental data. The last step is to report the results. Reporting not only the results, but also the methodology and any problems or questions is important to note. Reporting your findings enables others to build upon them.
Thank you for sharing that information. So how exactly do you go about using the steps of the scientific method to understand and explain how your sleeping schedule can affect the scores you receive on tests?
Well, I have used the steps of the scientific method to relate to my own personal experience. Last semester, I had all 4 of my finals on the same day, so I found myself staying up late and studying. My observation is that when I get less sleep, my grades are worse. The question pertains to my sleeping schedule and if it had any effect on my grades on tests. The first night on finals week, I had only 5 hours of sleep. Each night, I would get less and less sleep. My hypothesis states that if I don't get a lot of sleep before a test, then my grade will not be as high as if I got more sleep the night before. For my experiment that I conducted, I made sure to get a good night's rest and sleep for 8 hours before my stats test. That day, I studied for 4 hours. The next day, I studied for 4 hours and slept for 4 hours. I received a 70% on my test when I only slept for 4 hours and received a 96% when I got a full night's rest. In my experiment, my independent variable would be the numbers of hours of sleep. My dependent variable would be the score I received on my test. The control in this situation would be the hours of studying that I did each day. Based on this data, it can be concluded that someone who receives more hours of sleep will perform better on a test. Based on my observation, my hypothesis was proven correct. The reports state that in the future, it is better to get more sleep the night before a test and not to overstudy because it will affect your performance.
Oh, that was really informative. Thank you for that in-depth explanation. So, did you use inductive or deductive reasoning in this experiment?
Good question. I actually used deductive and inductive reasoning in this scenario. Inductive reasoning is when it moves from specific into a more generalized conclusion, while deductive reasoning moves from generalized to a specific conclusion. In this experiment, the deductive reasoning was that I tested several possibilities to reach one viable logical conclusion. The inductive reasoning is that after looking at the specifics, I conclude that it's better to get more rest before a test, before your performance on the test, because it will likely be higher.
Okay, so I have another question for you. What are the differences between a hypothesis, a theory, and a law?
Yes, I will explain to you the differences between each of them. First, a hypothesis is a proposed explanation for an observation that can be tested by further investigation. An example of this could be that if I don't study for the test, then I will still be able to pass the class. A theory is a contemplative type of thinking or the results of such thinking. An example of a theory could be that not studying for one test may not affect my final grade in that class very much. Lastly, a law is a system of rules that a country or a community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members. One example of this could be Boyle's Law. Ooh.
8 seconds.
Yeah.
Is that enough?
I feel like it will be.
You don't think
He wanted it to be closer to 5 seconds. I mean, he's not going to ding me for 2 seconds.
8 seconds.
We have to cut some out, won't we?
I mean, maybe you can like edit it and make it a little shorter in the editing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're good. 8 seconds. What will take off?
Yeah.
What does it say in the rubric? Like each additional minute or something?
Yeah, it doesn't really get too specific.